Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm really excited about this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we're tackling a combo that's a first, even for us. Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged A&D, the world of the video game Bioshock.
Wow.
Two totally different mediums, but both grappling with similar big ideas
Okay.
about power, society, and the choices people make within those systems.
It's fascinating to consider how a novel and a video game, each with their own unique strengths,
Right.
explore such complex philosophical questions.
Exactly. So on the one hand, we've got excerpts from Atlas Shrugged, which throws us into a world seemingly designed to punish its most ambitious minds.
Interesting.
Think industrialists, innovators, the folks who make the world run but are constantly being dragged down.
Yeah, it's a world on the brink of collapse, where the creators and contributors are burdened by regulations, societal pressures, and a distinct lack of appreciation for their efforts.
Totally. And then we have Rapture from Bioshock, this underwater city,
Yeah.
founded on the principles of absolute individualism and unregulated capitalism taken to the extreme. It's like someone took the phrase survival of the fittest and built an entire society around it.
And that's our mission today,
Yeah.
to dissect the philosophies at play in these fictional societies.
Okay.
See how their creators tackle these themes, and maybe see what resonates with you in the process.
Okay, so let's dive right into Rand's world.
Right.
Atlas Shrugged doesn't hold back. It paints a picture of a society where those who achieve great things are met with not just a lack of gratitude, but outright hostility.
Precisely. The novel challenges us to consider. What happens when a society takes its most valuable members for granted?
It's a good question. A great example of this is Hank Rearden.
Okay.
As someone who's always striving to build and create, I can really connect with this character.
Yeah.
He creates this revolutionary metal, Rearden metal, but constantly faces roadblocks from a system that seems determined to hold him back.
Reardon embodies the struggle between individual ambition and a society that often punishes those who dare to achieve.
You see it again and again.
But what's interesting is that it's not just external forces holding him back.
Right.
There's a sense that he's also grappling with his own internal conflicts, questioning the value of his efforts in a world that seems indifferent to them.
Yeah, I could see that. You see that internal struggle reflected in a lot of Rand's characters, actually.
Yep.
Like, take Francisco d'Anconia. He's this copper heir who seems to be intentionally destroying his family's legacy. And it's like, why would someone born into such privilege seemingly sabotage themselves?
That's where Rand's philosophy of objectivism really comes into play.
Okay.
It's all about the inherent value of individual effort and achievement,
Right.
and the freedom to pursue one's own rational self-interest.
I see.
D'Anconia's actions, while seemingly self-destructive, are actually a calculated rejection of a society that he believes devalues individual achievement.
This reminds me of that quote we pulled from Atlas Shrugged. Money allows no power to prescribe the value of your effort except the voluntary choice of the man who is willing to trade you his effort in return. Basically, it's saying true value comes from individual effort and free exchange, not from some external authority.
Exactly. And this is where we start to see the seeds of conflict between individual freedom and societal expectations.
Okay.
Rand challenges us to consider what happens when those two things are fundamentally at odds.
Which brings us to Rapture. But before we dive into that underwater city, let's connect these ideas to our own world for a moment.
Okay.
You know, that whole idea of your efforts being undervalued or feeling like the system is working against you. What are your thoughts on that? It's almost like, she's setting the stage, right, with these extreme examples of what happens when the balance tips too far.
Yeah.
In Atlas Shrugged, it's like society itself is this crushing weight, holding back its most brilliant minds.
Yeah, and in Bioshock, they've swung to the opposite extreme. Rapture is the ultimate experiment in what happens when you remove all those constraints.
Right. It's like, okay, you want a world built on pure individual freedom.
Let's see how long it takes to fall apart.
Exactly. And, spoiler alert, it doesn't go well.
Not well at all.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, though, how the game makes that decline so visceral.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm thinking about that one part, when you find that audio diary?
Oh, you mean the one from the, what was he? I think he was a trash collector.
Yeah, yeah. He's driven insane because there are no regulations, and his competitors are basically just preying on everyone.
And himself included. He just couldn't compete.
Exactly. It's like in a world with no safety net, no rules.
Some will flourish, but many will falter. And that's what Rapture really drives home. It doesn't matter how brilliant the initial idea is.
If the foundation is flawed.
Exactly. And that's why I think that quote we pulled really gets to the heart of it. The one where Ryan says,
We do not fix prices here. We do not regulate. We do not say who can buy what.
chilling, right?
It's like a recipe for disaster. But it begs the question, is there a way to balance those two things?
The needs of the individual versus the needs of society,
Exactly. Can you really have a system that allows for individual achievement?
without sacrificing things like, compassion, fairness.
Right. And is there a point where individualism becomes, I don't know, detrimental to the very society that enables it?
Now, that is a question with no easy answers.
It makes you wonder, are we doomed to swing between these two extremes?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think what makes both Atlas Shrugged and Bioshock so fascinating is that they refuse to offer easy answers.
Right. Like they're not saying, here's the perfect system, follow this blueprint.
Exactly. They're more like thought experiments, They're saying, what if we push these ideas to their logical extremes? What happens then?
And it's interesting because even though they come from such different perspectives, they both land in a similar place. This idea that unchecked ambition, whether it's at the individual or societal level, can have really dangerous consequences.
That's like that old saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Both of these worlds show us what happens when that plays out on a grand scale.
It makes you think about how we define progress, right? Like, is it purely about individual achievement? Or is there a collective responsibility to consider?
And who decides? That's the other thing these stories make you grapple with. Is the government? Is the market? Or is there some other way to find that balance?
It's a lot to unpack, but I think that's what makes this whole conversation so important, because we're seeing these same debates play out in the real world.
Absolutely. And these stories give us a framework for thinking about these complex issues, for understanding the potential consequences of our choices, both individually and as a society. And ultimately, maybe that's what makes fiction so powerful.
It allows us to explore these ideas, to challenge our assumptions without the real-world stakes,
Mm.
and hopefully to come away with a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Well said.
Well, on that note, I think we've done our due diligence for this deep dive. We've explored the towering figures and the crumbling societies of Atlas Shrugged and Bioshock, delved into the philosophical depths, maybe even stirred up some of your own thoughts on individualism, collectivism, and everything in between. Remember, the conversations don't have to end here. What resonates with you from these fictional worlds? What parallels do you see in our own reality? Keep those questions in mind and keep exploring.